Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast. I'm your host, Nat Nat, and today I have a wonderful guest. And we were chatting and talking before we started recording. I was like, wait, stop, because the stuff that we were talking about was like really good content that I think many of you guys will benefit from hearing that. So, Melissa, before we start, could you give myself and the listeners a little bit of a brief description of who you are?
Hi, I'm Melissa Hepner. I want to make a funny joke about my astrological signs, but I won't. Man, who am I? I'm a therapist in Oklahoma. I'm also a podcast host of a show called Emotionally Unavailable. I'm actually starting another one too with someone I met through podcasting called Unquiet Soul that will highlight some of our other parts of our personality too, but be around the same theme. I have three children. I'm married for, I think I figured it out this morning. I think it's been 13 years. Second husband, and I had this like super crazy extensive history of trauma in childhood. And then because I was the golden child, kind of thought that it didn't have any impact on me. And because I wasn't living my pain out loud the way my siblings were. And so then I spent my entire adult life like dealing with the impacts of that trauma without even understanding that that's what was happening, and kind of hit a really severe mental health crisis, the pinnacle of that being in October of 23. And since then have just been moving the pieces of my life and growing and evolving. Somewhere in there, I had a spiritual awakening, and that was totally an amazing experience. And now I just really work on expanding my consciousness and kind of, I would say, like, bringing forth the new earth is my hope. Like, that I'm making an impact on people and just showing them that imperfect is the way to go, and you can love yourself exactly how you are. So that's a very brief version of who I am.
So before we dig in, because I have so many places to dig in into that, will you join me in a mindful moment?
Absolutely.
So, as we were discussing beforehand, we are both kind of fatigued. And for me, the seasons changing just does something with my whole body. I think there's a little bit of apprehension that it knows the cold is coming. And I'm also navigating through grief because I'm going to come up to the 1 year anniversary of my friend transitioning from cancer. So, because of the work that I do, I can feel that in my body. And so I'm holding space for that. And as I always say, slow and steady. For the listeners, as you always hear my safety spiel, safety first. So if you need your visual, please don't close your eyes. Yet the other prompts you're able to follow with us. So please take this mindful moment. Many of us don't know how important it is to show up for ourselves. So I hope you'll join us. So, Melissa, I'll ask you to get comfortable in your seating. And if it's safe to do so, you're going to gently close your eyes or soften your gaze. And you're going to bring your awareness to watching your breath. And if you can, you're going to begin breathing in and out through your nose. You're not going to try and control your breath. You're just going to be aware of it, allowing it to guide you into your body. Now, there may be some sensations or feelings coming up, and that's okay. You're safe to feel. You're safe to let go. Surrender the need to control. Release the need to resist and just be. Be with your breath. Drop deeper into your body. Now you may be tangled in some thoughts or some to-do lists, and that's okay. Gently bring your awareness back to your breath, creating space between the awareness and the thoughts and dropping deeper into the body, allowing yourself to just be present. Again, more thoughts may have swooped in. Gently bring your awareness back to your breath, beginning again. creating even more space between the awareness and the thoughts, and completely surrendering into the body, into the moment, into presence. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Allow yourself to be, allowing that breath to open and soften your body. You may be noticing some aches or pains or certain things that you weren't aware of in your body. Now take one big deep breath in, gently exhale, and at your own time and at your own pace, you're going to gently open your eyes while still staying with your breath. How's your heart doing?
Good. I feel so relaxed now.
Yeah, I started introducing these about like over a year ago with guests because I was like, instead of telling people to meditate, let me bring them in what this little check in can be. And also, do the practices with the guest also so that we
Yeah.
can not just preach or say what there is, it's actually model it and see what that actually looks like in interactions. Let me tell you, the little perfective part or the one that wants to hide didn't really like to do that at first.
Oh, I
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah, like, whoo, how are these people going to receive this? How are they going to be? And it's like, no, let's model what that looks like and how we can show up for ourselves and do those check-ins. So, where do I go? Actually, let me start right here. What does trauma mean to you? How do you define trauma?
Well, I would say with my limited brain capacity,
Just
trauma
simple.
is just any event that has a lasting impact. I don't think it has to look a certain way, but if it's something that made you feel really afraid in any way and kind of caused a separation between you and your body, then it created that space between you and your true self. And so that's, I mean, there's, I really had complex trauma where I lived an entire childhood disconnected from myself for protective reasons, and it was just wrought with neglect and abuse. But I don't think it has to be anything like that. I think that people can see a car accident and be traumatized by it and have real lasting impact from that.
Yeah. Um, how I describe it is, trauma isn't the actual event. It's how you felt and what you didn't process. And then what your nervous system does is, as you said, it creates this separation from self and it creates this layer of protection. And a
Hmm.
lot of people don't realize, like, oh, well, sometimes they're like, well, I could feel all kinds. I can cry or get angry. And it's like, okay, at least you're better than what other people. Yet, did you ever have a space to process and make sense of what those experiences were? Because
Right.
especially with complex trauma as a child, your little brain that does not have lived experience cannot take in the magnitude of what you've been able to experience. And a lot
Right.
of times, as you said, emotions didn't feel safe to feel because the caretakers or the adults got activated with that. So it was very unsafe psychologically,
Hmm.
emotionally, spiritually. So a lot of times people think trauma is only a physical thing, where it's like, no, a lot of it is like psychological or emotional.
Hmm.
Yet it's that separation from self. And that journey is coming back home into the body, into self, which is a journey because there's a lot of emotions that come up that you have told yourself and your system has said, no, those aren't safe to feel. So let's just
Hmm.
keep burying them down. Yet, as we know, the body keeps score and emotions are energy. They're messengers trying to tell you stuff that a lot of times, sometimes we don't want to hear it because our
Right.
perfectionist mask is
Right.
coming up and everything else.
Yeah.
When you said that, you were the golden child and you didn't really see that the trauma had impacted you,
Hmm.
was there hypervigilance? Was there high achieving in your behavior?
So much hypervigilance, so much hypervigilance. I still don't recognize that in my childhood per se in the hypervigilance. I mean, I know it was there, but I recognize it more in my adulthood, especially because my first real intimate relationship was in adulthood, and that's where so much of this wounding came out for me in the first time. Insecurity, jealousy, just some real psycho stuff. So that was definitely present because I was constantly looking for reasons to attack,
Mm.
and so in hindsight, I can certainly see that. I was so separated from myself in childhood that it is hard to identify a lot of things from there. High achieving, it's funny, my initial instinct is to say no because of comparing myself to other people. But if I was comparing myself to my siblings, then yes. And like I was the first one to go to college, one of the only ones, one of a couple, and one of only a few to graduate from high school. So like in this world, yes, I was high achieving, but I graduated high school with like a 1.5 because my little trauma brain was not there for it, and I was allowed, like that was the one thing that, like, as long as you're passing or whatever, like fine, fine, fine. So because I was allowed the space to not have perfect grades, I didn't have perfect grades. But yeah, I was, what I really understand is I was super motivated by spite, driven by spite, because we were in a kinship foster care situation. So not only did I have really toxic family members that were saying really bad stuff to us about us, but also I received a lot of really good education through the foster system, but also a lot of statistics of what was likely for me to become if what I don't know, but this is a trajectory that children who have experienced what you're experiencing can go on. So I took, what my family, specifically some aunts who were just so determined to really tear me down, and then this education that I received, and decided I will prove you all wrong. And that was like my entire being, was proving everyone wrong. And I think proving me right a little bit, but it all came from that place of spite.
Thank you for being honest about that because I'm sure some people will finally be able to give verbiage of what that looks like for them and how it shows up. And I just want to bring some tenderness into some of the way that you're perceiving yourself because I do the same thing. It's highly critical that it doesn't meet a certain standard
Hmm.
rather than see like, oh, I did that and it didn't look properly because probably criticized or critiqued or again the comparison trap. Yet seeing like, wow, that was pretty intelligent of what you navigated through and how it showed up and the capacity that you know, and a lot of people don't realize too, with trauma, you learn the game. So the education system isn't the best thing to navigate through. So when you said good grades, I'm like, what does that really mean?
Right, exactly. I still don't care that I didn't get good grades. And
What does that mean?
I love to tell people I graduated with such a crappy GPA because I just need people to understand. Like, it was funny to notice me being like, no, I wasn't high achieving. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to unpack that one. But like also it had no determinant upon my success. When I got to a safe place to be able to learn, I went to college and did very well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was the same way. I had no interest in high school and everything else. And I used to do those, I don't know what the tests are called in Canada, but to see what your level in intelligence
Oh
is. And I
yeah.
get really high marks and they're like, why is she failing? Like it doesn't, these two
Yeah.
things. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, are you guys not cluing in that there was unsafety and there wasn't motivation? And, it's like, oh,
Right.
okay. But same thing, once, college and going, I actually motherhood activated the motivation for me because I still
Me
couldn't find it within
too.
myself. It was my
That's
firstborn
funny.
that activated that I could feel a sense of worthiness and
Hmm.
start to come back into that. Even though it was outside of myself, it was something that, okay, I don't want certain things repeated for you that I went through. So I'm thankful, even though, there's still things that got repeated that I'm like, oh my gosh, I should
I
know
know, I
better.
know, I
Yet
know.
that's how the human evolution is. And I think the most important thing is not about not making mistakes. It's about when you see them to be accountable as much as you can, because the more accountability expands your self-awareness, and then that there's safety to choose differently, to create space for those emotions and
Hmm.
deep ingrained patterns that have been protection that your nervous system has created, and really, face and meet that part, and all those hidden parts that keep coming up. Because once, and that's the thing where a lot of people think that there's this arrival, and once I know, everything will be so predictable and I'll know it all. And
Right.
it's like all of
I
a sudden
certainly thought that. I really did. I really did. Well, because we're kind of sold in some way, like you just gotta do this, or you need to change your mindset. And so as soon as you start to work on mindset and it uncovers this other stuff, you're like, man, I'm so messed up. Okay, so whenever I get here or after I work on myself, I thought it. I really did. I remember the day that I arrived at the conclusion, like, oh, there's not a destination. Like we're going to keep on. But that's why like I don't really look and say I'm still on a healing journey. I feel like I healed and made peace with things, but I'm going to continue to grow and evolve. But I
yeah.
feel like the energy in those statements are very different, you know?
They are. For me, I always put healing because I think for myself there isn't a healed part, because when those visitors come to knock again, say, the sexual trauma or feeling abandoned, when they come up, I don't have to push them away. I can open the door and allow them to come in, that they are a part of me and it's not having to be pushed away. And the healing also is for me that as soon as you are coming whole and you're with self, then there's more safety in your body to reveal more things that have been in the shadows.
Very
And then
true.
that takes that space of, oh, I thought I was, oh, and it's like, okay, you came to visit, and boy, where have you been? And just
Mm-hmm.
really be with all of that. And especially, when we're doing this, there's layers of depth. It's not about a trajectory of linear and it goes straight. It's that, okay, well, you had this experience and you could relate to it, and then life brings another, and then there's even more depth to it, and you go even further into it, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought I had this all kind of together, and it's like,
Yes.
nope,
When it
I
comes
am
back
learning
around and you're
more.
like, uh, okay, I'm getting another opportunity for deeper engagement in this. Okay. Like there's been three different themes of that for me that kind of like are different parts of me. But the first time you learn it is like this major aha, and you're like, oh my gosh, what a paradigm shift. And then I did not know you could have an even deeper understanding of things until the next cycle of that one thing comes around. And I was like, it's a totally different paradigm shift again. But that's like how all of my spiritual awakening has been, is like ta-da, and feeling like a completely different person from like morning to night. Like whenever I first started having all these major ahas, I was getting like 3 4 a day. And you know how much it like changes you as a person when you get
Mhm.
something that like big, to of an understanding about why you've done things and how you can do things in a more productive, loving, compassionate way. um to where like I was like, am I in spiritual psychosis? Because everything was rapidly shifting and I felt a physical unraveling. Like things were just being remade within me. And
Those neural pathways
yes,
were actually creating new, and you
it was
physically feel it.
crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I finally just like, actually, I was talking to my son who was like 16 or 17 at the time, and I was like, do you think he's pretty spiritual? It's just like, am I in spiritual psychosis? And he was like, no, I think this is a new belief system and a lot of change has happened in a really short amount of time and you're just adjusting. So I would just give yourself some slack. And I was like, okay, thank you. Cause he was the only one I felt safe to like say that out loud to. Cause I really was like, I think I may have lost my mind here. And I guess
Yeah.
in some ways I really did because I
Yeah.
shed so much of the old me in those days.
Hmm. What had you go into therapy and be a therapist?
At like 4 years old, felt the call to be a helper in that way. Like, felt as if I could hear someone saying, like, you're going to go through some serious stuff and you're going to get through it. And then you're going to share that with others, like how you got through it. And then I had that reconfirmed when I was like 14 years old. I was at school and I saw, I think it was like Miss Oklahoma or someone doing some motivational speech with some students in the gym. And I just got this like I'll say download where it was like you're gonna do that one day. Like your parents are gonna die because at this point they were both still alive. You've already been through all this and your parents are gonna die and whatever, and you're gonna use all of this, as your magic and you're gonna help others. So I kind of always knew I wanted to be a therapist. Um, but I put it on hold for a long time because I did full-time work in hospice as a hospice social worker for a really long time. And then I felt moved to work in education for a while to my middle one that I was just talking about, he really just struggled in school and whatever. And I just felt like kids maybe needed a different type of presence. So I did that. And then I started to pursue being a therapist, but it really wasn't until after my initial like healing started that I felt ready to do that because truly, I had lots of reasons, but what I came to was I didn't want to play act being a therapist, and I was not in any way authentic prior to that, nor was I really aligned. And so it once those pieces really started to move into the right place where I felt really aligned and at least on the journey of authenticity. I mean, I think, being seen is still something that is there to struggle with for me and, for lack of a better phrase, but I can still see where I am afraid to show up. I do it, but it's still like scary sometimes. But I really wanted I'm having trouble reaching for this word, but permission to
Mm.
show up exactly how I am and to not try to be anyone different when I'm working with people. And once I felt solidified in that decision that I don't really care what people say, I'm gonna be exactly who I am with therapy clients as I am with my children, with my spouse, with my friends, with my podcast guests, with people I'm talking to on their podcast. I'm going to be me in every single one of those situations and not really, there really is no division between who I am at home, who I am in this conversation, who I am with friends. Like, this is me, and I got to where I really understood that was my magic, and that's where I'm the most impactful. And once I gave myself that permission to just go be me, then I felt really comfortable. And like my clients know, like, well, I'm only a couple steps ahead of you on that learning. Like I learn stuff all the time from like podcast guests or being on someone else's to where I like yesterday in a session, I was like, okay, I met this really cool guy. He taught me this thing. Da da da. Let's try it. Like I'm not afraid to say I'm still a student. I'm still
Mm.
learning, and it's not my education that makes me really good at what I do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, that's a breath of fresh air for a lot of people to hear, especially the professionals, because there is this consensus that you need the accreditation, and then the institute tells you how you have to show up with your clients, and you're not, you're being evaluated and this and that. And it's like, well, are you taking into context nervous systems? Are you taking in context with the emotions and what we're feeling with what this person's capacity is? Because a lot, if you're really doing therapy, it's a lot of reading that nervous system, really
Hmm.
reading the body language, listening to the things that are unsaid. And, you know, mine is a lot of times people emote around me and they feel a sense of being open. So I'm like, I invite it to come out and they don't even realize how much they've been carrying inside them. And
Hmm.
I always remind them too that the tears don't mean only sadness. It's a plethora. Like, when you're happy about something, you cry. When a baby's born, you cry. When you win
Hmm.
something, you cried. So unfortunately, we're so stigmatized around our vulnerability that we only class it as, oh, it's only a dense emotion that shouldn't be seen and it
Hmm.
shouldn't be felt because it feels unsafe to reveal that. Yet, the more that we can hold that and be safe in being ourselves, like you just said, that's where the magic power is also. Like I get that all the time of how can you be that way? And back track to what you just said, being in the space of hospice, that is warrior work. Because as I mentioned, my friend transitioned in November.
Hmm.
She was, my mind is going, but I want to say 9 days, either 8 or 9 days. That no eating, no drinking. We're just waiting for the body to shut down. And every day the doctors kept saying, today has to be the day because
Hmm.
this isn't making sense. So I was there 24/7 with her, holding her and held her with her last breath. The amount of compassion, the amount of self-awareness you need to have, because let me tell you, some of the nurses that were in that floor don't belong there, and
Hmm.
they don't realize the damage that they're doing. However, I think also too, there's not enough tools for nurses and doctors and the professionals in that space to really start taking care of themselves so
Right.
that they
That's their
understand.
protective layer. Yeah, totally. I totally get that. I mean, I can remember a couple of nurses. So my dad died suddenly of a morphine overdose, but my mom died in a 3-week ordeal related to Hep C and cirrhosis, but it was gory and ugly because when your liver fails, it's gross. Um, and she had been incarcerated at the time. So there was just a lot of layers there. And I was very early pregnant, like 8 weeks pregnant with my first child when she was in the hospital. So I really needed some care. Like, can you tell me these things a little tenderly? And I can remember, I really more remember the people that were so soft with me and they cared so much that her daughter is pregnant and you know, being careful about not letting me come in until they get her cleaned up because this when, there's a lot of blood or whatever. And I remember the one nurse who was so impactful who was in the room when she died and just the way that she dealt with me, and that was my driving force for, like, I knew I wanted to be in hospice. And then in early undergrad I took a death, dying, and grief class. I felt so pulled to that, you know what I mean? And I just knew, like, okay, I can't do anything to stop this from happening, but I can help. Like, I can make it more peaceful or more comfortable for both this patient as their advocate and their family. And so for me, it was easy to get into that space with them. It was actually like at first, my I remember my first death and just being like, okay, but it feels weird to not be the one sitting there holding their hand. And like I want to make sure like they're okay. And I had to like learn how to like build some boundaries around that. But it's so much better than the people who came in with like 1,000 protective layers. And I've known so many nurses like that, and I know they care about what they're doing, but they just can't go there with people. Like not
Yeah.
themselves, not themselves, not their family, not their work people, like not somebody who's dying in front of them. They're emotionally unavailable, and that is what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned it, emotionally unavailable. What brought the podcast. How did it come about? How long has it been here? And tell me all the details. Was there a muse that came to you? Was it in meditation? Was there a prayer? What brought it? Because it's very well needed, because a lot of people don't even know how to give the verbiage of what emotionally unavailable is.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm a Gemini. I've always wanted to talk. I had wanted a podcast ever since I came across Armchair Experts with Dax Shepard, like totally inspired. But the name for it came because I thought it was hilarious. But that was like the beginning of healing for me, even before the mental health crisis, because I'm a person who takes a quiz, like, just like, which Grey's Anatomy character are you? That kind of thing. And there was a quiz that said, are you emotionally unavailable? I take this quiz fully expecting not to be seen as emotionally unavailable. And boom, it says I am. And so I text a social worker friend of mine and I was like, do you think I'm emotionally unavailable? She's like, yeah, I do. And I was like, what? I mean, angry. Because I have no capacity for this, like none. I opened a huge can of worms with this one little quiz. And I was like, can you give me an example? Because this is new information for me. And she's like, the way you retell your trauma. And I was like, that hurts because I'm funny. Like, I legitimately did not realize it wasn't normal to tell these stories like you're a stand-up comedian. And I kind of had hopes of being a stand-up comedian at some point and using those stories. Like, I could not do that now. Yes, some of them are funny and I can tell them funny, but I'm so connected to them in a way that I never was before. Like,
Mm.
now there are certain stories that I used to be able to tell with a smile on my face that I can't tell without crying. You know what I mean? So just there, I was so disconnected. And so that was kind of the beginning of learning to try to be more vulnerable, but not understanding what the barrier to vulnerability and authenticity really were. Hence the reason I had a mental health crisis. So when I started to like move the pieces of my life, I knew I was quitting a toxic job and I was like, I've wanted to do this podcast and I wanted to do one with a friend at first because I didn't feel like I was interesting enough to do it by myself. And then I just was like, we're doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And that was kind of my first step too towards imperfection and being okay with it. Cause I said, perfect is the enemy of good. I like literally repeated that phrase to myself all day, every day, because I didn't want to get wrapped up in all the pre-production stuff. I wanted to start this thing from grassroots and it be I wanted people to see someone do something in a really ugly way and watch it transform. And
Mhm.
I have transformed. The people on my show are who saved me, truly. Like the information I have received from them, it's still, I mean, literally, I'm learning every week. Like I'm such a student. And like I'm getting a lot more comfortable saying, truly, this show's about me. I mean, it's my journey to becoming more emotionally available, honestly. Um, and that looks different with each guest depending on their level of expertise or what they're bringing to my show. I like a wide variety of conversations. Sometimes it's a medium, sometimes it's a therapist, sometimes it's whatever. So it's just a different connection point. And I really, in inventorying my life, ask like what lights me up, and it's connection in this way. And my former life lacked authentic connection. Like I was reliving that cycle that we're all kind of programmed with to connect via talking badly about people, gossiping, complaining. That was the only way I connected. Mostly complaining, a lot of gossip. I mean, I was just as guilty as anybody else of that. And so that I'm really comfortable saying like this is kind of the only conversation I want to have. And that makes me a little too much for people from my former life. So I mean I would call myself a little bit isolated, but I don't feel there are times it feels a little lonely or whatever because I don't have anyone aside from like my husband or kids to go do things that I want to do with a girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's also fine because I just make new friends through the internet and we have these kind of conversations. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's really the show. I mean, and I have a really good time with it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being a guest and seeing where our conversation will go in there. So, and I thank you for, accepting because I sent the message to you and asked if we would do a pod swap, and you graciously said yeah. And so I'm like, okay, come on, and I will be on yours in a few months. And I really thank you for being vulnerable and doing the alchemy, taking those impurities and turning them into gold, yet not just keeping it for yourself. You're sharing it with others in a world that wants perfection, that wants it to all look together. It's like, what does healing out loud really look like?
Hmm.
Not when it's all perfect and in a nice box. Like the book that I just wrote, that I have to actually, do you know any editors that are like trauma informed or?
Possibly.
Okay, well, we'll get that after the recording. Yet the title is called The Gift Wrapped in Sandpaper, Your Untamed Power.
Ooh, I love this.
Yeah, so it's really understanding that sometimes we have certain life experiences and we don't see it as a gift, yet taking that sandpaper and polishing it off and getting off the edges, then we see the magnitude of the gift. And sometimes there's a gift and it's wrapped around sandpaper and we don't want to touch it because that hurts and it doesn't look pretty, where we don't realize the depths of how powerful that gift is. So
Hmm.
really understanding, the work, because when you have been shaped by complex trauma or, trauma, there's a lot of work that goes on. There's a lot
Hmm.
of work to relate to yourself, to have compassion for yourself, to bring sensitivity, to bring vulnerability in there and not see it as a threat, but your body reads it as a threat because when you were young, you weren't able to go into those spaces. You were
Hmm.
harmed. So automatically it's doing its job of protection, and having to
Whew.
do that rewiring and
Yeah.
hold yourself accountable and still continue to choose to lean in is like warrior work that I say. I know certain listeners and myself, we heard mental health crisis. What did
Hmm.
that look like for you?
It looked like me making a plan to end my life because I was just in a really hopeless place. I now understand that I was dealing with a lot of subconscious shame. I was a very reactive person and really I self-identified as mean. I'm just mean and I don't know how to treat people and I talk to people like crap and whatever. And it was not like everyday strangers. I would freeze or fawn in conflict with other people, but with my family and my close friends, I had a very sharp tongue and it was I didn't think before I spoke. It just happened. I was very reactive. But I got to where I just felt like my kids were better off without me. I truly believed that because I wasn't perfect. Because I wasn't perfect, that's what I understand now, is that I was holding myself, to a
Standard you,
crucifix of perfection, like it was not
yeah.
gonna ever be attained. And so because even then in making a plan I was still trying to be considerate. I was like, oh well, my oldest kid's birthday's in a couple weeks, so that's not cool. And then I was literally going through a calendar trying to pick a date. I was like, then it's Thanksgiving, then it's Christmas, then it's the next kid's birthday, then the next kid's birthday. So I picked a date that ended up being like 10 months away. So within a few days, very quickly, I was like, okay, because the relief that making the decision that yes, I was going to, setting the plan in motion, having a date, that brought such relief and quieted the noise just enough to be able to like chill for a couple of days and then get clarity, which is like, okay, if you're going to make it to 10 months from now, something's got to give. Like we have to get better if we're even going to make it to this date. And so as I kind of started doing whatever I could, I was just kind of borrowing information from the internet basically. And and it helped. I mean, it really did. I was growing in the way that I could at the time. And like I said, I had a spiritual awakening during that time too. And so starting to just kind of get different information helped me move pieces. And I was spending time creating in a way that I had didn't even know I had like the capacity for. So I was learning how to get like in a flow state, and those were like the little baby coping skills I had to get through that time. And there was a lot of crying, wailing. Like even when I started my show, those early episodes, my voice is so raw from like crying so much because like I'd be crying over a tech issue right before or for a couple of hours before over a tech issue and something else because like I just literally had no capacity for any stress. I was just
Hmm.
beat down. It was like I was truly at rock bottom and trying to build, up from there. And so that's kind of what I did was just piece by piece built
Yeah.
back.
Thank you. Thank you for, the courage. And I want to thank your protective system because to make plans, there was a part that was still advocating for you. Because
Yeah.
suicidal ideation, when you're really in a dark place, I had a friend that committed suicide last year and she jumped from her balcony. She kept
Mm-hmm.
telling us, and we, listened and everything else, yet it just overtook her, the voices and everything else. So I want to thank that protective system that still had the engagement of still being able to feel the pain because people don't
Mm-hmm.
realize a little stressor of something not going right, it feels 10 times worse than somebody
Yeah.
that has a very reactive nervous system that has no capacity. It's very
Mm-hmm.
painful. It sends off all kinds of signals and shutting down and everything else. So it's like, you don't want to feel that anymore. And
Right.
a lot of people don't understand what that feels like, especially if they've never had to engage with their nervous system that way. It can be
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to hold space for understanding for that because it's invisible. And
Or
a lot.
even just if no one's ever shown up for them when they needed them to.
Mhm.
The way we dismiss others, the way we've been dismissed because we don't know how to hold space for somebody in general if no one's ever done it for us. And
Exactly.
and so yeah, it was rough.
Yeah, it was. Okay, I'm mindful of time, so I want to bring you into a reflective question.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you to go and take this awareness right now and go back to your 18-year-old self. And
Okay.
what are three words you would tell your 18-year-old self to carry you to the journey of right now?
You're always worthy.
Nice. Those are powerful ones. Very powerful ones. And I'm sure there was parts of you that would have said bullshit at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
still reinforcing the message. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can the listeners find you?
I'm super active on Instagram at melissa.hepner. My first name's spelled a little weird, Malisa. My link tree is there for all of the things that I'm doing. I create workbooks. I recently started this a couple of months ago, but I'm releasing a new little instant download workbook every month. And like the first one was Safe to Be Seen so that you can start to kind of see parts of yourself and just like, really slide into that authenticity piece, feeling more in alignment. I've got one about perfectionism. This next one releasing is just like balance and harmony, things like that. But that's all on my link tree. And both my Unquiet Soul, the other podcast, is not going to release until October, I think, 7th, but that will be on the link tree whenever it does. But there's links to the two major platforms for Emotionally Unavailable on my link tree, but you can get it wherever you listen to podcasts. Um, I have if you're interested in my childhood story, I have a book. I have not promoted this very much at all because I wrote this 5 years ago, but my book, Owning My Crazy, is on Amazon. I did release like a revamped, which just adds just a tiny bit of like recovering from that crisis because I wanted it to be released to a wider market. But truly, I only did that because I had published on Amazon only. And people like acted as if I wasn't a valid author because they couldn't find it at Barnes and Noble. So then I felt like I had to like do that. So truly, like, there's no point in buying the revamped version at all. I only did that because I was like not secure enough in myself to be like, and how many books have you published? Okay. So the Owning My Crazy, the original one, is I like it. I wrote it very much how I talk, and kind of it's funny, you'll see how stunted I was because like just the limited information I knew about healing at the time was kind of highlighted at the end, but it was just about like my limited understanding of nervous system regulation. But truly, I just wanted a way to share my story. And so that's there. I have some children's books if you know there are any like school counselors listening. I wrote that from a very school counselor perspective. So I have a journal on Amazon. So yeah, that all of that is on the link tree, but my website's on there too. So if you want to connect with me one on one, that is on the website.
So now with our conversation, I'd ask you to go within yourself and feel into what a listener may need to feel empowered, and what would that message be for them?
I would say that regardless, like it's great when you can see the things that still need attention. Like, and I hope that you're always going to find some new layer that you need to quote unquote work on or grow through or whatever verbiage you want to use. But don't let that make you forget that who you are right now is perfect. Like you're great. You're already all the things you're trying to become. We need to unbecome more than we need to become. So like you don't have to strive for a destination, and that is sneaky. Even when we sit here and say there's no destination, I'm sure tomorrow I will find a way where I thought there was a destination again.
Mm-hmm.
So take time to really sit and honor who you are and every part of you that got you to where you are right now. They are all magical, and who you are right here, right now, is full of all the magic you're ever going to need. So, you know, I just encourage people to just put their hand over their heart and just love themselves and say, "Thank you. I love you. You're great. We're doing great." Because the whole human experience is supposed to be imperfect. So if you are imperfect, you're doing a really good job.
I want to thank you for having such an enlightening and wonderful conversation. It was a breath of fresh air of the transparency, the vulnerability, and the lived experience that you have to offer to other people. And like I said, you're doing the alchemy. You've taken those impurities and you've transformed them into gold, and you just didn't keep it for yourself. You're sharing it with others. So thank you for being such a bright light in this world. I am greatly appreciative that we are connected.
Me too. And thank you so much for having me. I had such a good time with you.
Please remember to be kind to yourself.
Hey, you made it all the way here. I appreciate you and your time. If you found value in this conversation, please share it out. If there was somebody that popped into your mind, take action and share it out with them. It possibly may not be them that will benefit, it's that they know somebody that will benefit from listening to this conversation. So please take action and share out the podcast. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Lift Oneself. And if you want to inquire about the work that I do and the services that I provide to people, come over on my website, come into a discovery call, liftoneself.com. Until next time, please remember to be kind and gentle with yourself. You matter.